Do you have a product or service that you believe could change everybody's life? If you said yes, you need to watch this video. Because instead of preparing your business to scale, you, my friend, might actually be preparing it to fail. I'm Quadira Tiart, author and founder of Feel Well and editor-in-chief of Feel Well magazine, where we curate the stories, ideas, experiences, and relationships shaping how ambitious women build wealth, protect energy, extend longevity, and lead at the highest levels. And for the next 10 weeks, I'm taking you along with me as I move through Black Ambition's Fundable Founders Learning Labs, facilitated by the team at Codner and Company. Before we get started, I just got to give a huge shout out to Black Ambition, Gamal Codner, Vincent Hunt, and the entire facilitating team for creating a room that is already making my brain go off. I'm not here to give you their curriculum. I'm here to tell you what is making my brain tick, what I'm questioning, what I'm applying to Feel Well, and what I think you might be able to take back into whatever you're building. And today was one of the first conversations in these 10 weeks, and it was about something we've all heard before. That is, less is more. There's nothing revolutionary about that sentence, right? But entrepreneurs, and especially women in business and leadership, we have to be reminded of this over and over and over again. We come into business thinking about everything we can create and everyone we can create it for. We want to serve. We think about every problem we can solve, every platform we can show up on. We're gonna dominate.
And don't let things stop working in our business and our ideas and our concepts. Oh, now we're really gonna start adding things.
More ideas. Whatever someone else is doing, we wanna try to implement it too because we're looking for success. You don't always need more. Sometimes what you need is mastery over the one thing you already have. And that brought me to what I'm calling the power of one. One customer, one core product, one traffic source. That's what Gamal told us to do inside of this session today. And I think there is something really powerful in that for us as entrepreneurs, women in leadership, women in business, because we are so conditioned to think that scale means more. We think it means we need more products, more customers, more channels, more offers, just more everything. But dare I add, what we actually need a lot of times is just to leverage our influence. Scaling actually begins with narrowing down enough to master your one thing. And I know this because I've spent more than 15 years in branding, marketing, business coaching, and consulting, telling entrepreneurs everybody is not your customer. When people first come into business, we want to save the world, or we really do, and I get it. We know what we created can solve a problem. We've seen people hurting, so naturally we start thinking about everybody who could possibly benefit from it. But y'all, everybody does not need saving from you, from us. There is a particular person whose problem you were uniquely built to solve. I've taught for years something I believe deeply, that our ideas, our dreams, and even some of the things we feel called to create are born out of somebody else's prayers. Somebody has a problem, and somewhere in your experience, your mind, your perspective, your gifts, your history, there is a code with a solution. So the challenge isn't necessarily figuring out whether you can serve people. You know you can. The challenge is having the discipline to decide. As Gamal said, decide on who is your one. But then Vincent Hunt came in and he took the conversation somewhere that made it even more interesting. He said that sometimes the reason we refuse to narrow down has absolutely nothing to do with business strategy. Sometimes it's just pure ego. He talked about this idea of an ecosystem of promises. So maybe when you first started your business, you told your family, your friends, everything you were going to do, everybody you were going to save, all the problems you were going to solve, all the people you were going to serve, all the things that this great big empire of a company you're building was going to become. But now you've learned enough to know that you gotta niche it or narrow it down. But narrowing down feels like you're breaking a promise, he said. And that really hit me because I've been thinking about energy all week. Over the weekend, I had a conversation with my friend and attorney, Sarita Morgan, over smoothies at Nutridiva in Delray Beach. You got to go check it out. And we were talking about how much time we spend thinking about protecting our energy, protecting your peace, right? We talk about this all the time, protecting yourself from this person and that person, protecting yourself from that environment, protecting your ideas, protecting your energy, always in protection mode. And Sarita raised a completely different question to me that really has struck me in my soul. And that was, what about allowing energy in? I've really been sitting with that because I started thinking about how much of my own life and business I have spent playing defense with my energy. And when you are always playing defense, y'all, sometimes you forget that energy is also supposed to play offense. It is supposed to move toward something, build something, create something, expand something. So when Vincent started talking about these invisible forces that keep us attached to all the things we said we were going to do, I immediately connected the two conversations. Because sometimes the energy that should be going toward what's coming next is being spent defending an old identity, an old promise, an old business model, an old audience, an old version of yourself. Or worrying about what somebody who really should not even matter in these decisions is going to think. That is an incredible amount of energy to spend protecting something that may no longer belong in the future you are building. And there was another conversation today that I really appreciated around the difference between knowing a population and actually knowing a customer. Because when we talk about target markets, y'all, people love demographics. Where does she live? How old is she? What does she earn? Is she married? Does she have children? And all those things, they matter. They absolutely matter when you're deciding where to place your advertising dollars, where your customer may be, and how you should reach her or him. But I've always been fascinated by psychographics. I want to know what makes people tick. In my case, what makes her tick? What happened in her life that made her start looking for this solution? What is she thinking when nobody else is around? What is frustrating her? What does she secretly want that she's not telling anybody? What has she already tried? What does she believe about herself? What has happened psychologically and emotionally that has brought her to the point where she needs what we at Feel Well or any business are creating? And that made me start thinking even more deeply about Feel Well, because I really had to ask myself, who is our one woman? Not every woman Feel Well could technically serve. Not every advertiser. Not even every partner or every business owner. Who is the woman at the center of this world we are building? Who's at your center? I kept coming back to the ambitious woman in leadership and business. She leads, she builds, she carries a ton of responsibility, and she carries it emotionally. She is trying to increase her wealth, but she ain't broke. She cares about her health. She wants something meaningful to last beyond her. She wants to be the most powerful version of herself. She wants to feel powerful, feel inspired, feel the frequency of growth. But underneath all of that, accomplishment is making these women, this one woman, tired. She's overwhelmed, she's stretched, and she's still overachieving somehow. She's also underpaid. And a lot of the times she feels under-supported. Sometimes she's carrying everything for everybody, including herself. And she often thinks, who is carrying me? Who's going to carry me? And then one of the founders in our cohort, Malika from Grand Rising, said something that sent my brain somewhere completely different, off into the stars. She said she had been thinking about Ready for this question? What was the hardest day in her customer's life? And instantly I transported and I saw myself sitting on the bathroom floor, crying my eyes out, hyperventilating, postpartum, completely overwhelmed, feeling unsupported, feeling unappreciated, and feeling like I had absolutely nothing else to give. And the important thing for me to remember about that woman on that bathroom floor is that I wasn't devoid of dreams. These women are not devoid of ambition. I wasn't devoid of any ideas. I wasn't suddenly unintelligent. I was depleted. So there is a difference, and not every woman is experiencing this. I got out of this because a friend told me something incredibly simple that helped me feel well. She said, "Baby, if you can just get up and go outside for a few minutes." So I did. 10 minutes walking became 20 minutes the next day. 20 minutes one day became 45 another. 45 minutes one day became an hour. And many times an hour became an hour and a half to 2 hours. To the point where my family would call me on the phone like, hello, are you still alive? Where are you? Because I would get lost walking and running outside, having a grand time by myself, listening to music, dancing up and down the streets, listening to podcasts, feeling myself come alive once again, and slowly reconnecting with myself. The sun fed me, movement fed me, music fed me, the space, it fed me. And little by little, I started feeling like myself again. So sitting in today's session, I realized that experience is not separate from why Feel Well exists. It's foundational to it, because our one woman can still have the vision. She still has her intelligence. She still has her talent. She still has ambition, yet she still does not feel well enough to carry everything she is building. That is the woman that I understand. And that is why I don't think entrepreneurs can ever revisit these questions too many times. What am I building? Why am I building it? And who am I building it for? Because your company is always growing. Your customer is always growing. And if you're doing this thing right, you are always growing too. It reminds me of Jay-Z. He wasn't going to wear throwbacks and fitteds forever, right? At some point, he decided to put on the button up. And then he evolved again. And we're watching him evolve over and over and over. People are always changing. Cultures are always changing. Your customer is always changing. And your brand should have enough intimacy with the person it serves to recognize that evolution. Now, another interesting question that came up today, and this one is still unresolved for me, is what happens when the business genuinely has more than one type of customer? Because Feel Well is interesting, right? We are B2C because we are building for ambitious women who consume the shows and the magazine and the content, the experiences, our conversations, and eventually the larger Feel Well world. But we are also B2B. We work with advertisers, sponsors, partners, brands that want access to the audience and world we are building. So when we talk about the power of one, that is something I'm still thinking through. What is the one that drives the entire ecosystem? I don't have the complete answer yet. And I actually think that is one of the beautiful parts of being in a room like this. You get reminded you are not stupid. You are not slow. You are not behind. You are building something. And if you've never built this exact thing before, of course, you are going to run into questions you never had to answer before. That's building. And I find something incredibly powerful about being in rooms with other people who are also figuring things out. Because sometimes the power of a room is not that somebody teaches you something you have never heard before. It's that sometimes the room breaks something open inside of you. I believe there are two expressions of us living inside of us at the same time. There's the expressed version. That's the version everybody already knows, right? The version you give permission to speak, the version you give permission to be seen, the version you allow to enter into every room. Sometimes that is the version you believe other people will like, the version you think can be successful, the version you think is acceptable. But then there is the unexpressed version of you. This unexpressed version of you, she sees more. She's the observer. She's processing through a different lens than the expressed version. She thinks about and witnesses the things you haven't said out loud yet in your mind. She knows the standards you have not completely embodied yet, but you have them. She sees possibilities that your current life may not reflect yet. And a lot of times she is whispering, but you keep telling her, sit down, not yet, be quiet, I'm not ready. But she can see it all. And she's just waiting to be expressed. And you keep telling her, don't say that, don't do that, don't be too much. The good news is that she's gonna wait. She will wait. She will wait and wait and wait, because she cannot force you to give her permission to live. You have to decide. And interestingly enough, decision making was one of the ideas that came up in today's session as we closed. The point was made that one of the hardest parts of entrepreneurship is simply making decisions. And I completely agree. I would even extend that beyond entrepreneurship into leadership, because so much of leadership ultimately comes down to your willingness to decide. Focus is a decision. Choosing one is a decision. Letting go is a decision. Narrowing down is a decision. Deciding that the version of your company you promised somebody 3 years ago no longer belongs in the company you are building today is a decision. Deciding to stop spending your energy defending who you used to be is a decision. And even deciding to give that unexpressed woman or unexpressed man inside of you permission to finally rise is a decision. So that idea from today's session really brought everything full circle for me. Maybe your problem isn't that you need another idea. Maybe your problem isn't that you need another product. Maybe the problem isn't that you need another platform. Maybe the question is, what are you doing too much of because you still haven't made the decision to choose? Who is your one? What is your one? Where is your energy supposed to be going? And what part of you have you kept quiet that may actually hold the answer? Because somebody out there has a problem that only your experiences, ideas, gifts, and particular way of seeing the world may be uniquely equipped to solve. But they cannot receive the solution until you decide to bring it fully to life. That's my biggest reflections coming out of today's Fundable Founders Learning Lab. And this is Building Well. The learning, the building, the embodiment. That's it. I'll see you after our next session. If you want to learn more about anything that I am building, please visit us at feelwellmagazine.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel to stay in tune with the next 10 weeks of my Fundable Founders Learning Lab, where I am going to be showing you behind the scenes of us building well.